Imam Hussein ASWS, not only submitting himself, but also the best of his companions and family members. And now we'll proceed with the next presentation, and I would like to invite our dear brother who came all the way from Edmonton to join us tonight, Brother Zaman. We welcome him with Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم صل على محمد صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum, dearest elders, brothers and sisters, my dearest fellow Hajis and friends and everyone that's here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Really was just on a personal note, an honor and a pleasure of mine to be invited to such an event, and traveling across the country really is the least that we can do, really the least. When we look at and we learn about the Sahaba of Imam Ali and Imam Hussein and the Ahl Bayt and the sacrifices these men made, and I think some of the other brothers, previous speakers, have mentioned, the comparison between people like us and people like the Sahaba. In a lot of ways, we're the same and very similar, just average people. And average people who live average lives, but in our lives, we come to these moments where decisions have to be made, and those are the moments, and in between those moments where, in my personal opinion, life is lived. And we need to understand, from my personal life, one thing that I've learned is to really spend time and reflect and think about the differences between haqq and batil. So I have selected one of the Ansar, and I'll just make a few points that I reflected upon, things that personally, they're personal points. So I'll leave them with you guys. No answers, but just more questions for us to ponder, inshallah. The Ansar that I selected is Burair ibn Khudair. I'll give you some background. This was one of the close companions of Imam Ali. In his lifetime, he was a well-known teacher of the Quran in the city of Kufa. And when he joined Imam Hussein, it is a well-told story that Burair told Imam Hussein that this honor for him was as a gift from God. We hear the stories. There was many men that came, and our dear Imam Hussein would time and time again make very clear that anybody that didn't want to be there or had qualms or had family or job or things that they needed to deal with, they were free to go. They were free to go. No, there was no compulsion among the Sahaba. So the people that ended up staying and ended up sacrificing themselves did so out of their own self-will because of their pureness of their heart. So this comes back to another point that I'll bring up about Iman, and something that I personally reflect upon, and what does that mean? So this is the Sahaba I've selected, Burair ibn Khudair. He was a well-known a scholar and a teacher of Quran in the city of Kufa. He spent time with Imam Ali and naturally was a supporter of Hussein and his cause. Upon reading about Ibn Khudair, I started thinking and pondering, and just to come here to speak in front of all the brothers, I tried and do some research. And one thing that when we look at research and history of humanity, we look that, you know, history sort of repeats itself. We look at a transition in time, and I just went from recent history, from where we can all relate, and, you know, post-World War II, I started looking at history, and just on a big, you know, overarching scale, looked at what's been happening in our society. And one thing I realized was there's a shift between, after, you know, the Industrial Revolution, of the family structure and how we would view, you know, our families and how we interact with our families, the relationships that we have with our family. With this being said, you know, it occurred to me that, you know, when families are strong and are well bounded, we see the nations are strong. As a nation, we can be strong. And when there's dysfunction and disintegration within families, we see the nation becomes disintegrated and weak. So, you know, these are lessons that when we look back to our Ahl Bayt, and we look and we learn from these people, the simplest of things, as salam, that as taught, you know, that they teach us on, you know, it's not wajib to say salam on anyone, but it's wajib to respond. So these are, again, those minor points within life where we start to realize the ethics in this beautiful religion that has been taught, and the importance that is given with family. The reason I brought this up is recently I had a personal experience where a close friend of mine, that he's a colleague of mine, and he's a dear colleague, a dear brother, but he's a fellow Christian. He follows the faith of Christianity. And we would have discussions and discourse back and forth about the Holy Quran, about the Ahl Bayt, and he's very interested. And he's read the Holy Bible. So he invited me to visit his church. He said, why don't you come and sit with me, you know, on this Sunday, and we'll come to our church. And, you know, he welcomed me. So, for the sake of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, can I have a salawat? So I'll try not to go over my 10-minute limit otherwise. But I'm known to be a talker, so as everybody knows here. So he invited me, and I went to this church, you know, to kind of build a camaraderie with him so that we could open our hearts together and have discussion and learn more. And I was amazed when I got there at what a wondrous and beautiful church. It was like a cathedral, and you could tell like millions of dollars were spent. It was very elaborate with stained glass windows and just a very beautiful setting you can imagine. Being from Montreal, there's some beautiful cathedrals here, I'm sure. So I sat there and, you know, I was pondering, okay, well, I have come and, you know, for the sake of opening each other's hearts and discourse and teaching each other. And I was amazed that when the actual program started, there was, you know, in that particular time, in that particular church, maybe 20 people. 20 people ended up arriving, and the procession started. And it was a very big, you know, spacious cathedral. So to me, you know, after the amazement, I was even more amazed at how small the number, with such a powerful place, that I felt the power, I felt it in there, that only 20 people felt that, you know, that they could show up that day for whatever reason. Where I'm going with this is this. I was pondering to myself about this church before I came here, and I realized, you know, to build a church like this, you have to have such strong foundations, such expensive foundations, to erect such a wonderful, majestic building. And then we look, you know, in the month of Muharram, we're visiting each other, the brothers and sisters. You feel the love among our communities, and we're teaching each other. And from people's basements to, you know, different industrial centers, any place where we can find, even a center like, you know, like this university, any classroom, alhamdulillah, we gather together. What foundation is, you know, this religion built on? It's not built on anything expensive. It was the foundations that it was built on was something totally different. These foundations, you know, for the engineers, if you were to shake a building, what happens to the foundations of that building? They become weak. When you know, we look at this event of Karbala and the sacrifices, time and time again, the Ahl Bayt have shown us through sacrifice that any time someone tried, and this is what I learned, you know, these are things that I reflected upon, that you could tell what Yazid was doing, what the enemies of the Ahl Bayt have always tried to do, was to shake the foundation. They didn't try and shake, you know, somebody who doesn't really follow the faith. They go to the foundation. What better place than 2 minutes? to shake the religion. So they had done this, and my point that I want to get to here is that of foundations, and the foundations were built upon family values, as we see with the Ahl Bayt, and the importance of family. My second point, which I'll burn through and get to my third point because that's my favorite one. My second point was that about love. I was recently, we were fortunate to see a lot of brothers here have come back from the Hajj, where we learned about love. One thing I reflected upon from the story of Karbala was, when we look at family and we look at love, we think, to myself, I think of my family, maybe my mother, maybe my children. I see a lot of small families. I see maybe your husband or your wife in a marriage. There's love. With that being said, you know, life is short. Today we walk, and tomorrow, unfortunately, we won't be here. When one partner of a marriage is left behind, it's kind of the role, if you can follow with me, or the responsibility on the shoulders of the partner that's left behind to sort of fill the void of the person that's passed away. In a partnership, likewise, in the Ahl Bayt, we see the transition, the void that was left behind by our Imam Hussein after his tragic death. There was a big void left behind. The people, you know, at that time were like in peril. They had questions, and it was natural that Imam Hussein walked in and he filled that void. Again, like, this was something that I saw as an example for us to look at. That definitely with families and marriages it happens, and we see this again. This was a lesson taught very early on about true love and what it means to give more than we end up taking, where it's always about giving. And that's what Islam has taught me, and that's what I learned from the story of Karbala. And my final point was, it's more for the youth, and for me, you know, I speak to myself about this. Growing up as a Canadian, we grew up in Canada, and we have, like Mubarak was saying, we're very far from the institutions of Islam. We're very far from these sorts of things. So Islam lives within all of us as we live in this country. But I have a question that I would like to leave with all of us, that I posed to myself. What is success? This was a simple question. What defines success in my life? I asked myself, is it money? At times in my life I thought it was. Is it knowledge? Was it our degrees? Is it my status? Is it my clothes? What defines success? And this is something that, you know, we should all always ask ourselves. What defines success? When we go to the Quran, we find that success is defined as Iman. Those who sincerely make a sincere effort to purify their hearts, very sincerely, and are successful in doing so. Those truly are the successful ones that fear none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they then are able to see the difference, what I started with, haqq and batil, between right and wrong, to enjoin good and to forbid evil, as we'll see this reoccurring theme. With going back to my Ansar Buhair Ibn Khadir, we see this man. The one story that was told about him was on the night of Ashura. He was sitting among the companions of Imam Hussein, and he was very jovial. He was smiling, he was joking. And one of the companions didn't feel very comfortable, and he came to Buhair and he kind of made a concern. Why are you joking? It's the night of it's the day before Ashura. How can you possibly be smiling and joking at this time? And Buhair, his response was very interesting to me, and one of the key reasons why I selected him. His response was, one of the companions, as they say, he said, I was never a man of jokes, but I am very happy at this moment. I'm happy and yearning for heaven. He told, like I was saying, Buhair told Imam Hussein that it was such a gift from God to fight with you, to get parts of our bodies cut, to die on the battlefield for you, so that I may meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to be in heaven, to basically have the shafa of the Prophet and to go on this track. Do you see how he was so form-fitted? I thought, how could somebody be happy in such a tragic moment? The only way, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you could be smiling and joking at such a catastrophic moment in history that we cry about till today and we commemorate as if it was yesterday, could only be if this man truly in his heart had Iman, had clarity of his heart, and he knew the difference very clearly, that he was on haqq and that he had left batil. He knew clearly, and at that point, despite all odds, despite the armies, despite all odds against him, he was happy and waiting for the final moment. So again, this is my final point, that what defines success, and it is Iman. So let us all reflect upon that within ourselves. And thank you so much. And sallallahu alayhi wa sallam salawat.